I don't know, but I've got a feeling that this church knows what they're doing and have a reputation of doing this, because I know their pastor. But the whole feeding me like that before I get up and speak is a good plan. It's a good plan. You can go from about a 45-minute sermon down to 5 minutes and change. So I know y'all's pastors, so I'm pretty sure y'all probably pulled that a time or two. But it's good to be here tonight. I love this church. I love Brother George and everybody down here. And I love wild game dinners. And I've had the opportunity to speak at a lot of different game dinner type things over the years, and I love doing them. It's the first one that I've done in a while. But I kind of just rolling around in my mind how I want to go about it tonight, what to speak on. And I've been in revival this week. Thanks, sir. I've been in revival at another church this week up until last night, and so I didn't know if I wanted to just kind of continue along that route or what I want to do. But since it's a wild game dinner, I'll start like this. The outdoors, I guess, is what you could say, but hunting and fishing and really just everything outdoors is my life outside of Jesus and pastoring and those things. I mean, it's what I grew up in. It's all of my hobbies involve that. It's just as if the Lord asked me to go somewhere where I couldn't hunt and fish and all that, I absolutely would do it. But I would be sad about it. I love the outdoors. And this morning I was very blessed. My son, and this kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about tonight. My son Jed, most of y'all probably know him or know that story. He's 18 years old now, and he's grown, and right now as we speak he's out on the lake fishing, and he's ate up with it in a big way, hunting and fishing. But this morning I got to spend time out in the turkey woods with him. It's youth season, and he's too old to youth hunt anymore, so we found us a kid. Ain't that how that works? Hey, I heard the brother up here with 100 feet and hungry a while ago shoot that extra deer. I heard that. But anyway, we found us a youth hunter, one of the boys from our church, and we went out there, and I told Jed he doesn't need me anymore. He's probably better than I am anymore. I said I'm just going to go video, and I watched my son as he took that young man and went out there and found the turkey and called the turkey up and set him up and all that good stuff. And the Lord blessed us. He was able to get that turkey. And Jed kind of took the lead on that whole deal. And I watched that, and the whole time I was thinking, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that the Lord has done for us and brought us through in our life. For those of you that don't know our story, that same boy, Jed, who's 18 now, when he was 3, he was diagnosed with a very rare and aggressive cancer with a 95% mortality rate. And I'd started pastoring, doing what God wanted me to do, a little old church up there in Haley, Arkansas, with about 25 or 30 people. It was some of the best times, of my life, because when you have 25 or 30 people, you got 25 or 30 problems. And then when you get 600 people, you got 600 problems. But I had a wonderful time, and God was blessing, and we were growing, and we were growing in number, 25 or 30, and man, we got up to 45 people, and we felt like at 45 people every Sunday we were holding Billy Graham crusades. It was wonderful. And we were growing and doing what God wanted us to do, and people were getting saved, and all of a sudden my little boy's diagnosed with a cancer, and it just absolutely just rocked our world, and just changed our life. And I know I've shared this story 5,000 times, and I'm going to share it 5,000 more times, but I want to start with that tonight to kind of show you where I'm going to go. And my little boy is diagnosed with that cancer, and a couple of ladies from that church called and asked if they could come down and pray, stand in the yard and pray for Jed the night before we were going to go get all the prognosis and all that stuff. And we said, of course you can. I mean, we're just in shock still and don't know what to think. And at 7 o'clock that night, I walked out on my porch and there was over 200 people standing in my yard.
Wow.
And some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. Had somebody show up about an hour prior to that, a lady from Texarkana, Arkansas. This is the truth. I'm not making any of this stuff. A lady from Texarkana, Arkansas that I'd never laid eyes on in my life before. She knocked on my door and she said, "Is this the Harper residence?" I said, "Yes, it is." And she said, "You don't know me and I don't know you, but I work in Texarkana, Arkansas." And she said, I feel really odd even saying this, but she said, "The Lord spoke to me and told me to come right here and pray for you." And our mind was just blown. Of course, absolutely come in and pray. It's 7 o'clock, all those people in my yard. And so we brought Jed out and we set a chair out there in the yard. And Lori sat down, my wife, with Jed in her lap. And I gathered around, and all those people gathered up around him and began to pray. There were 7 pastors that anointed my son with oil from 7 different denominations. And we didn't even realize that at the time. We weren't even thinking about it at the time. 7 different denominations, and they prayed for my son, and the power of God fell in my yard that night. And as the Spirit fell, even a little boy at 3 years old can feel when the power of God moves. And his leg kind of moved and kind of kicked. And my dad, of course, Grandpa was there praying for his grandson. And my little boy kind of kicked my dad there. And my dad raised up and he said, "It's okay, son. We're praying for Jesus to take care of you." And he said, "I know, Papa. I can see him right there." That's what he said. Yeah, it's the truth. And we went that next day and then the next week and they scanned him. They pulled bone marrow out of his bones. They took every blood test, all the things. And they never found another single cell of cancer in him to this day. And it's an absolute miracle of the Lord. Miracle. Changed my life. It changed my life. But in the spirit of wild game dinner, I'll tell a few stories. That changed my life. And I was already pastoring, but man, I saw what the Lord can do firsthand. It changed the way I preach, changed the way I prayed, changed the way I pastored, changed the way I lived, just changed everything. I know what God can do. I don't walk into a hospital room now and have no hope. No matter how hopeless it may seem, I know what God can do. It's up to Him whether or not He does it in the way I think He should or whatever, but I know that He can. So anyway, there was a man that lived up there at Story at this time, and he came up there that night and he said, we were at that prayer circle. He said, I was at a revival camp meeting 11 years ago, 11 years prior to 2010. And he said there was a man there preaching, and he said there was somebody prophesied at that. And I don't know how you feel about all that or what you think about all that. I really don't care what you think about all of it. I know what God can do. And he said he gave a prophecy and nobody there had a clue what he was talking about. But he stood up by the power of God and he said there will be a story come out of Story one day. And this wasn't even in Story. It wasn't even where the revival meeting was. He said nobody even knew what he was talking about. Nobody knew what he meant. And he said he stood up and he proclaimed that with his whole heart, and then nobody had a clue what was going on. So they just went on with the service, and he said, I was at that night and heard it, and he said, I believe 11 years ago, this moment's what that man was talking about. Because we live in Story, Arkansas, a story out of Story that will reach the world. And although I was thankful and all, but I was focused on my little boy at the time. I was focused on what he was about to have to go through and all that stuff. God healed him miraculously. We went through all the chemos, the scans, the surgeries, all those things. And man, if you see him, Matthew about half raised him. That's old Uncle Matthew right there. And Matthew can tell you, if you see him right now, you would never know there was. He runs up down them hills faster, catches more bass, does all those things than me and old Matthew combined. The only thing we got on him is we can do better back there at the potluck line. We got him on that. But a story out of Story. And we didn't even think about that much until just a few years after the Lord healed him. The Lord began to open doors for us to minister in ways that I never thought. And I want to read a passage out of the Gospels tonight. And it's out of John chapter 9. I'm not going to be real long. I thought about preaching a real long sermon, and then I went back and got some more of that strawberry cake. So probably not. Probably not going to be real long.
I'll preach on.
You're going to have to let me breathe a little. John chapter 9 verse 1. And this is the passage that I go to often when I think about my son, and not just my son, but just the story of the last 20 years. Just the last 20 years of ministry, and Matthew here plays such a huge role in it. I mean, when he came in, he paid his ticket, and I told him, I said, y'all probably ought to just let him in free, because half of my sermon's about him. He provides the material, you know. But this is the passage that I always think about, and it's the 9th chapter of the Gospel of John. Verse 1 says, Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? They assumed that somebody had done something wrong because this man was in a bad way. Aren't we that way? When we go through a trial, we go through something in life, the old devil wants us to just assume it's because God doesn't care about us, or we've done so much wrong that there's no hope for us. And the disciples, the followers of Jesus, even assumed that in this moment. There's a man that was born blind. He's in a terrible position here. Was it his fault, obviously, or was it his parents, obviously? Which one was it, Lord? And look at Jesus' answer. This is life-changing. Jesus answered and said, Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. Amen. The reason that God allowed this man to be in that position is so the power of God could be seen through his story. That's right. Now if you read on in this story, you'll find Jesus miraculously heals this blind man. Amen. And it changes lives. I'm telling you, people understand and realize the power that Jesus has by seeing this man. They say, isn't that the one that was blind? And their response is, he was blind, but he's not blind anymore because Jesus came into his life. He had an encounter with the Lord and it changed him, and the glory of God was seen through his story. Yeah. My story that started 18 years ago or 20 years ago, and then escalated greatly back in 2010 with my son, and then to a story out of story. I didn't understand what that meant until, man, God set out all-out revival in my life through my son's journey. We got through with all that chemo